Hello, hello. Welcome back to Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me, as always, is Nathan Kwan. And joining us is our special guest and MLB expert, Evan Tenenbaum. We have some big news to discuss this Sunday night, specifically in regards to one Adrian Beltre. We would like to welcome the newest member of the 3,000 Hit Club. Evan, what do you take away from this?
Well, what I take away from this is back in 2011, when the Rangers decided to sign Beltre to a 6-year, $96 million contract, a lot of people thought that this was going to be a bad move. He was coming off a really good season in Boston, posting almost career-high numbers. He did have a kind of a fluke of a 2004 season. But he had really good numbers in 2010, and Boston didn't want to really bite the bullet and buy a long-term contract with him. The Rangers did, and a lot of people didn't like that. And here we are 6 or 7 years later, and we're looking at a guy who's who's definitely a lock to be in the Hall of Fame, and probably even a first ballot Hall of Famer. And today was just the culmination of that. 3,000 hits here in this season that maybe lost to the Rangers, but it gives a reason for fans to be really appreciative of this team right now. And really props to him for, staying healthy throughout his entire career, for being able to turn on the Jets late in his career when people thought he was just a defensive whiz. And, now he has both the defense and the offense. I guess post 2010, he has a 134 plus win runs created plus. So that's 34% above major league average. So you're looking at someone who's really turned on the Jets late in his career, and the Rangers gambled and really won. And I couldn't be any more thankful for this guy.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, funnily enough, both me and Evan, basically we kind of bonded over talking about Adrian Beltre back in the winter of 2010 when we were both at the DMV. But essentially, this was pretty much right after Cliff Lee had announced that he was going to go back to the Philadelphia Phillies, and so the Rangers were trying to find a way to make a splash in order to get back to the World Series. And really, the only impact signing that was left was going after someone like Adrian Beltre. And of course, as Evan brought up, at the time he was really considered someone that for sure was a defensive whiz, but only someone that seemed to produce during contract years, which honest to goodness was complete BS. Because when you consider that he spent a good 5 to 6 years in Seattle at Safeco Park, which completely suppresses right-handed hitting statistics. If he wasn't hitting there during that time, he would have had even better numbers than he does now. And this is someone that just reached 3,000 hits for his career, which only 30 other people have done prior to him. Which says a lot about just how talented he is. I mean, honestly, he had one of the greatest seasons of all time for a hitter back in mid 2000s, where he hit 48 home runs, had above .300 hitting for his batting average.
Do you know who we lost the MVP to that year?
Albert Pujols?
No, Barry Bonds.
Oh, God damn it. Another reason to hate Barry Bonds. Another reason to hate Barry Bonds. But yeah, no. So I mean, considering how productive he's been for that long, and this was all the way back, we're talking about over a decade now, and the fact that he's actually been more productive after 30 years, and especially when you consider how everyone pretty much knows now, your prime years are pretty much your mid to late 20s at this point. The fact that he's been just as productive as he was during what most people would consider your athletic peak is just absolutely incredible. And the fact that he's still an incredible, not only an incredible hitter, but a very good defensive third baseman at 38. I mean, and that's the other thing too, is just that the only thing that's that he's really trended downwards in as a player is just his health. If he wasn't hurt this year and earlier this year, maybe the Rangers would have won a few more games for sure. But that also being said, I mean, he's just been a model of consistency his entire time with the Rangers, and it's just been an absolutely phenomenal thing to watch. And it's just honestly, the biggest thing that I regret about Adrian Beltre is the fact that we've only been able to go to one World Series with him. Honestly, he and Yu Darvish and Pudge Rodriguez are some of my favorite players of all time to ever play for the Texas Rangers. And like the fact that like more than likely Adrian Beltre is going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Texas Ranger is something to be really happy about, especially considering how this franchise has kind of like been one of the bottom dwellers for most of its history. So thrilled that Adrian Beltre, well, obviously, like he was a Hall of Famer prior to today. I mean, it's nice that he's hit this milestone that pretty much guarantees that he'll be in the conversation of one of the best to ever play this game and arguably the greatest third baseman of all time. What's your take, Quan?
Well, yeah, mad props. Congratulations. It seems like this season has just turned into an Adrian Beltre appreciation, and I think well-deserved. He's been the ageless wonder the last couple of years when the Astros and Rangers have played. He's always seemed to come off the big hit. And one of the lone veterans on a pretty young team. I think the leadership aspect, and I would always laugh when guys would try to touch his head. And I think Orbit, the Astros mascot, tried that at one of his pregame pranks one time, and it didn't really go over well. But I mean, yeah, great career, great defender. He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done, and well deserved for him. 3,000 hits.
And like you said, you could tell that he really loved the game, whether it was his antics with his shortstop mate and Elvis Andrews, or it was just the dancing whenever a pitch got too close to him and he kind of like backed away from the plate, or whether it was any of the antics of like, when a ground ball's hit to him and the runner's running towards him and he just goes and bear hugs him instead of tagging him. Just any of those silly little things that he did that didn't really pertain to how he actually played the game. It really speaks wonders in how much he really enjoyed the game and how much joy he brought to both fans and his teammates.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said, and it's just like whenever he's on the field, he just makes the game fun and just so engaging too. And that's not to talk about sort of obviously the overall trends of like how baseball is trying to stay relevant, but I mean like that's the fact that he was so engaging of a player to watch. And just so exciting to watch too. I mean, like you like we talk about like little idiosyncrasies here and there, whether it's like head touching or just like dances when the ball gets too close. But I mean, like just like the fact that he's like he basically he's a player that has a signature move in a sense too, with his like by hitting home runs on one knee. I mean, like he's just like he's honestly one of the most iconic players I think of this era. And definitely far and away the most iconic to play for the Rangers of ever. So he's someone that brings a nice liveliness to a game that far too many people sometimes complain about being too sort of like couched in its own traditions, in a sense.
So moving back onto the field, the Rangers, they made their first trade deadline deal today as they traded away catcher Jonathan Lucroy to the Colorado Rockies in exchange for the player to be named later. So Evan Tenenbaum, I guess this is a sign that the Rangers are selling at this point.
Seems like it. You look at, I guess, the past week. They got swept by the Orioles later last week. Then they turned around and proved that they're going to sell by sweeping the Tampa Bay Rays. And then they actually proved that they were going to sell by dropping series to Miami and Baltimore. So the first line of dominoes is fallen, and it's Jonathan Lucroy. Interesting to see that he was the first domino, and the return that we got for him as a player to be named later usually signifies that it's either a list of prospects maybe that aren't that great, and then we would have to choose at the end of the season or later on in the season, or we were just trying to essentially do a sunk cost kind of thing. You look at that trade that we traded for Lucroy last season, Lewis Brinson, Ryan Cordell, and Luis Ortiz. Cordell has actually been traded to a different team, so we can count that as a push. Luis Ortiz is still in the minors, and Brinson's now in the majors, and he's starting to work his way up within the Brewer system. And then you look on the other side, Lucroy is probably having his worst season in years, as is Jeremy Jeffress. This is really, in my opinion, John Daniels' way of admitting defeat for this trade, along with starting off the selling. And a lot of people aren't very happy about it. I'm kind of indifferent about it. I didn't really like the Lucroy trade last year, just because I thought we were fine with Chirinos. Obviously, he has some injury issues that really prevents him from being a starter, and we needed someone like Lucroy to be that stopgap starting defensive whiz, but he hasn't really done any of that this year, and like I said, it's kind of a sunk cost thing, so we're trying to get as much as we can out of that. Simmons, what do you think about the Lucroy trade?
Honestly, at this point, I'm fine with it. I mean, like, I liked the deal last year when we traded for Lucroy. I mean, like, if there was any position that we could have really improved on last year, it was catcher. Because as much as like Trinos was giving decent production there, like you didn't. There was always that concern with him, just like possibly like kind of like his production started tailing off at some point, just because like he didn't have the track record that Lucroy did at the time of giving quality production at the position. And I will say this, like Lucroy was pretty good last year. I mean, like he was able to give what we were expecting. Although I will say, like his defensive game wasn't as expected last year, and only got worse this year. Along with pretty much a lot of the rest of his game. Like it just, I thought the deal was fine for what it was, and especially considering like, look, the team last year was very much in contention, and like they wanted to get back to the World Series, and that was a team that could have gone back to the World Series, but unfortunately, that didn't happen for one reason or another. Now, that being said, at the end of the day, I'm fine with trading away Lucroy. I was hoping for maybe better return, but I mean, at the end of the day, too, like, I mean, as much as people have talked about like his former production being like more of having more weight in weighing a player's value, I mean, it's hard not to look at Lucroy and see that just his production has pretty much tailed off, unfortunately, and it was always going to be very hard to make the case that Lucroy was worth like a strong prospect in return.
Yeah, I think the two things that he has going against him, one, he's in a contract year, and two, he's, again, having a really bad year. And I honestly would have thought that teams would have looked at his previous 6 seasons and thought, okay, well, maybe he'll, have a bounce back or something like that for the last 2 months. But obviously we couldn't get anything better than that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, baseball is very much a what have you done for me lately sport, So, I mean, I don't think that's going to be held as much against like someone like Yu Darvish. I think Yu Darvish still should be able to return a pretty decent package if we do end up going out and moving him. But, I mean, I'm really not surprised with the return from Lucroy.
Yeah, that moves on to, I guess, the next topic is who else would be candidates to be sold by the Rangers in the next 20 hours or so.
Yeah, so I foresee a couple different possible moves that could be made. You're going to be looking at a lot of vets that may be going, Adrian Beltre being the exception. I think you got to look at these guys who may be under contract. Carlos Gomez is having a decent year. He's not having a great year. He wasn't as good as he was when he got traded to us last year, but he could net something. Mike Napoli's had a actually pretty good season if you count out April. April was awful enough for him to drop way down, and he's kind of struggling to, I guess, get back up. He's, I think, at about a 750 OPS right now, which is about average. But that first month was awful, and maybe a team would look for a right-handed bat off the bench in Mike Napoli. But he's not going to really net you any prospects. Some people that could potentially, Andrew Kashner. He's had probably his best year since 2014, in the mid 360s ERA. His peripherals are a little bit worse, but they've actually gotten better since the beginning of the year. You could probably net him a lower to mid-level prospect, maybe like an A to a high A or something like that. Then you have actually a particularly interesting case in Alex Claudio or Keone Kela, probably our two best relievers. Claudio is especially interesting because he's your lefty out of the pen, while we have Jake Diekman potentially coming back for the rest of the season, so you could replace Claudio in that sense. Claudio is having an incredible season. He has about 3 years left of control. A lot of teams like that amount of control on a reliever because usually by the end of that, then they may have lost their skill. So Claudio could net something interesting. That brings us to Yu Darvish, the master ace that actually wasn't very ace-friendly or ace-like in both the 2012 and the 2016 playoffs for the Texas Rangers. He's in his contract year. Rangers have actively said that they're looking to shop him. He's coming off the worst start of his career statistically, which is really interesting. There was a report that he was tipping his pitches. Whether that was on purpose or not is, I guess, left up to people's imaginations. I personally think it was involuntary. Anyway, the point is, he's on the market. He's definitely a hot commodity, and there are teams that are actively interested in him. Some being the Dodgers, the Indians, the Yankees. I've seen the Astros, but I've seen nothing like concrete about prospects. The most I've seen is the Dodgers. So what do you guys think about who do you think Darvish should go to?
I mean, I'd be fine with trading him to the Dodgers for sure. I mean, like, I think we talked about this a little bit before, but I mean, like, definitely like someone like Verdugo or Walker Buehler. Those are two prospects that I have my eye on. I mean, I guess another interesting prospect that could come back, but I doubt, is Julio Urias, who, I mean, there's a lot of question marks regarding whether or not he comes back and is anything at all close to what he was prior to getting injured and missing the rest of the season this year. I mean, I don't know what his value is, and I don't even know if the Dodgers are willing to part with him and are just rather willing to just take the risk and see if he comes back at all. But yeah, I mean, like, I think the Dodgers would probably be the best fit. The Yankees might be interesting just because, like, I don't really know who the ace is of that rotation when it comes time for the playoffs. I mean, although that being said, like, a part of it is just because, like, that rotation is kind of young. But that also being said, like, it's difficult too because, like, I mean, like, you want to be able to get a good return for Yu Darvish. Now, that being said, like, obviously that does bring a good interesting question, the rumors that he might have been tipping his pitches, which I highly doubt was voluntary in the slightest. But I think it also indicates that, like, the fact that he is up for trade rumors, you keep Yu Darvish, is because you think you have a shot at signing him long term. Now, granted, even if you offer him the qualifying offer, he turns it down, and he signs somewhere else, you're still going to get a compensation pick from the first round, and so that in itself at least has some value. But if you don't think you have a shot at re-signing him, and if the rumors of him being traded actually hurt your chances of re-signing him, then you might as well just try trading him and getting something in return that you have more control over. I mean, again, it's going to be difficult, especially with less than 24 hours till the trade deadline. But John Daniels has right now is the unenviable task of deciding whether or not he should be trading away arguably his most valuable asset at this point, especially for a team that, I mean, as we see, has struggled to put together any semblance of a starting rotation this year. And for the upcoming future, I mean, it's kind of a little bit bleak in terms of, like, anyone that could step up as a potential ace of the rotation. And so possibly the best way to try to do that is to trade Yu Darvish for prospects that could, especially since, like, I don't think there's really anyone in the system at the moment that could become a reliable ace in the especially the near future if you're also going to try competing next year. Which, I mean, if you don't think you're going to be able to, you might as well also try trading away Cole Hamels at this point.
Yeah, you got to absolutely trade him at this point. Like, if you're going to rebuild, you don't do it halfway. You got to, and the compensation pick, I mean, it's a draft pick, and you don't know how that's going to turn out down the line. I think you absolutely have to move him. The other teams that have been mentioned are Cleveland, which I guess is coming in here late, but they've had struggles in their starting rotation with Josh Tomlin and Danny Salazar. The Cubs as well, they've had problems in their rotation. So, yeah, I don't really see the Astros being in the sweepstakes. The news out of them is that we're really looking more toward a reliever at this point. I think General Manager Jeff Luhnow has put it out there that he thinks the price for starting pitching so far is just too high at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. You just got Keuchel back from his injury. McHugh's been back for a few weeks. How have they been doing, really? Have they been really kind of holding steady, or do you think you're getting better things from, like, Mike Fiers or Musgrove or any of those, like, back-end fill-in guys?
The guys that have come back, Dallas Keuchel just came back Friday night. He wasn't good, but you would hope that he would return to his Cy Young form. He just needs to get his pitch count back up, and he gave a one home run that really caused all the damage on Friday night. Colin McHugh has made 2 starts. First one wasn't so good. Saturday night he was actually pretty good, 6 innings, 1 run. So you would think he would slot in there at some point. The problem has been Lance McCullers. So he got hurt right before the All-Star break. He made the All-Star team, but in 5 starts since coming off the disabled list, he has an 8.62 ERA, and his command has just been terrible. So we don't know what's going on with him because we need Lance McCullers at this point. The fill-in guys you mentioned, they've been actually really good. So Mike Fiers, ever since all the guys got on the disabled list, he's really stepped up. He had a rough outing his last start, but he's earned his spot in the rotation, I think, for the long haul. And then Brad Peacock's also he got his pitch count up, and then he's been really solid for them as well. So, I mean, really, they have 6 guys, the other being Charlie Morton, who's been more than adequate this year as a middle number 3 starter or so. So, in terms of depth, I think they have it. They just need to get Lance McCullers turned around. Dallas Keuchel, they need to get him back on track. Colin McHugh, whatever you get from him, I think you're going to put him in at 3 number 4 starter anyways. And then Fiers and Peacock, I think one of them has a real shot of starting a postseason game for the Astros. And if they're not starting, they're probably going to play a big role in the bullpen because those 2 have been really good for them.
Yeah, that's what I see. Like, coming from a guy who's a fan of a team that was in the last 4 playoffs in the last 6 years, sometimes your starting pitching can make or break. Last year, the Rangers starting pitching folded. Hamels and Darvish and Colby Lewis folded. And we really didn't have much opportunity to take back anything when we were down early. And so you have to wonder, obviously you have that relief squad that can maybe pick up the slack and hold steady while your offense, comes back from the lead. But at some point you have to really trust your starters. So you have to think, well, obviously the Astros were in the 2015 playoffs. So you got to think, okay, well, is Keuchel and McHugh and McCullers, is that going to be enough to hold steady? And you have to think, well, these other guys, they really don't have playoff experience. Are they going to be enough? Are they going to be able to scrounge together enough so that we can overcome? Playoffs are really just a different game than a regular season rotation type of thinking. So I wonder how you think that your rotation can transition.
Well, really, I want to stress that as much as there's a lot of question marks in the rotation, the bullpen was supposed to be a strength of this team at the beginning of the year. And if you haven't been following, the bullpen has been a mess, especially the last month or so. Guys have just absolutely imploded. Tony Sipp 2 years ago was your star, and he was probably your second most trusted reliever. And this year he has an ERA over 6. Luke Gregerson hasn't been dependable at all. Your depth guys and James Hoyt, who's been sent to AAA. Francis Martes is just so young. They sent Michael Feliz to AAA. There's nobody you can trust other than Chris Davinsky, and he's been not good the past 3 weeks coming off the All-Star break. And Will Harris has been hurt. He struggled in the playoffs before. And then Ken Giles, you never know what you're going to get from him. So, I mean, we saw it last year with Cleveland with Shaw and Miller and Cody Allen, how effective that bullpen. You could just get to the 6th inning and then the bullpen would ride you the rest of the way. The Kansas City Royals rode that bullpen to a world championship the year before that. So I think the way the game is played now, a lot of starters aren't even getting deep into the games anymore. And with the bullpen in the way it is for the Astros, I think them going after a Justin Wilson or a Zach Britton, a lefty reliever who's dependable and can get a high leverage outs, I think is very important, especially in a close game in the playoffs.
That's definitely true. Is there any other positive things you want to talk about the Astros? I see your offense is still kind of exploding.
Yeah, I mean, offense is just continuing to carry the team. We have 11 players with double-digit home runs in July, which is it already tied a Major League Baseball record. Jose Altuve is playing a video game with sliders up and all the cheat codes on because he hit 484 in July. He had a 747 slugging. That's a 1.273 OPS, 19 RBI, 4 home runs, 44 hits. A lot of guys are just banged out right now. Alex Bregman missed some time. George Springer has a strained quad, and obviously Carlos Correa is still out. So a lot of guys been in and out of the lineup, but with the big division lead, I think it's smart to rest guys who aren't 100%. But we're looking to hopefully make a deal and starting rotation to pick up some quality starts and maybe get a reliever in here.
Definitely a good thing that you have such a big lead in your division that you don't have to worry that much. You have all these teams underneath that are going for the wild card right now. Technically, the Rangers are still in it. It seems like if they're selling off their pieces, that it will be less likely they'll be able to compete in it. Now you're looking at teams like either the Yankees or Boston in the East, even the Tampa Bay Rays. Then in the Central, you have Kansas City, which seemed to come out of nowhere. Really, ever since their awful April, they seem to have popped out. Kind of that Royals magic that kind of goes on, even with the awful lineup that I thought they had at the beginning of the year. And then in the West, I guess you could say the Mariners and the Angels are still in it. Angels have sort of tailed off, but then they ended up playing pretty well after the All-Star break. Mariners look good too. So with all these, like, I've seen a bunch of different smaller minor trades going on in this last week. Nothing's really happened since that Quintana trade. Jaime Garcia went from Atlanta to Minnesota and then to the Yankees in 2 teams in 6 days. Good for him. Jeremy Hellickson, funny enough, went to the Orioles. The Orioles bought Jeremy Hellickson, which I think is an incredibly dumb move for a team that has no chance in that division. But and then again, there's a bunch of relievers that are going in between these wild card teams: Tampa Bay, Seattle. Obviously, Indians are looking to pursue Yu Darvish along with the Yankees and perhaps maybe the Astros. Like, these next 48 hours will be really crucial to see which of those, mid-level teams will want to go ahead and go all in to maybe secure a wild card spot. Who do you think will pull out?
I mean, honestly, for me, with the way Kansas City has played the last week, and I mean, they have the postseason experience. They won the World Series a couple of years ago. They still have a lot of the same guys on that team. I think Mike Moustakas is having a career year, so I think they're going to be in it for the playoff hunt. Tampa's interesting. I mean, they've had the good pitching, but they've fallen on hard times recently. Seattle, I don't know. We were all high on them in the beginning of the year. We just haven't seen the consistency from them. So, I mean, at this point, I'd probably go the AL East runner-up in Kansas City.
That also being said, I mean, I think Kansas City is heading in the right direction and is pretty hot right now as well. I still think Cleveland still ekes it out in the Central. But I mean, the West is pretty much wrapped up, obviously, and I'm trying to think. I think it's probably whoever wins the wild card. It's probably going to be either it's going to be between Cleveland and Kansas City.
Fair enough. I do think the AL wildcard race is much more interesting than the NL, where you actually see the Chicago Cubs have overtaken the Brewers in the NL Central race. The Cubs off to a really hot start after the All-Star break, but the Brewers are buying, so you may be thinking that they're trying to go in to secure a wild card spot. They got a long way to compete with Arizona and Colorado, long 2 months. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out in the NL.
What do you see the Dodgers or the Nationals doing? It seems like those two are in an arms race at this point. Dodgers losing Clayton Kershaw, and the Nationals had Steven Strasburg pulled from a start. So what do you see those teams doing?
Well, I think Dodgers definitely need, I guess, a visual look at what their franchise has been doing. They haven't been to the World Series since 1988. They've made so many playoffs in the last 30 years and nothing really to show for it. I think they're looking, and obviously this is wishful thinking, but I think they're looking at Darvish very favorably, and I think they're going to try and either pull the trigger on him. Okay, so I do think the Dodgers look at it and see, okay, well, we need someone to anchor this rotation with Kershaw hurt right now, we'll need a little bit of time to maybe settle back in before the playoffs once he comes back. But then you're looking at the playoff rotation of Kershaw and either Darvish or Sonny Gray. And I think that looks really appealing to the Dodgers right now. So I think they're going to go a little bit more head on with the trade deadline in the next 48 hours. The Nationals,
Bullpen.
yeah, they need bullpen help. So they're going to look at the same people that the Astros are looking at right now. They're actually really in a similar boat. So in Washington's kind of in the same thinking as the Dodgers have. They've never been to the World Series. Neither the Expos or the Nationals have. So that's on them to really find the right keys in the bullpen. Obviously, they tried with Papelbon last year, and look how well that turned out.
Don't get him and a Bryce Harper in a room together. Won't end well.
Definitely, that's true. So that's pretty much what's going on in the MLB right now. Obviously, the next 48 hours will blow everything we just said out of proportion and prove us all wrong in our predictions and things like that.
Well, thank you so much, Evan, for coming on, talking MLB. All right, so let's move on to some NFL news, and the Dallas Cowboys making some news again this past week, Nathan.
Yeah, no, just completely atrocious. So we obviously touched a bit on Ezekiel Elliott last week and said how much of an idiot he is. I mean, nothing's really changed on that. Unfortunately, things got even worse for Lucky Whitehead. Not only did he get his dog stolen this month, but within the span of 2 weeks, he got his dog stolen, then his identity stolen, and then essentially his job was stolen. Unfortunately, for Lucky, he was accused of a crime that he did not commit. Because the person that actually committed the crime, the last name Whitehead, and somehow had the other guy's had Lucky's social security number. And then tried identifying himself as Lucky Whitehead. And so because of that, the Cowboys, feeling, I guess, the pressure of a summer filled with a player misconduct, decided to make an example out of Lucky Whitehead, and they cut him. And unfortunately for him, he was the only one that was cut for misbehavior. And to show the complete ineptitude of the Cowboys, he was the only player this year that did not, who was actually innocent. So, unfortunately, and even worse for him, he got picked up by the New York Jets. So, wow, just a horrendous 2-week span for him. Just his life completely unraveled. I mean, at least he has a job now, but good Lord. I mean, what happened to him is completely just atrocious. And Jerry Jones should feel completely and utterly ashamed of himself. That is just ridiculous. That you would jump to the conclusion that he was guilty before having all the evidence there, especially when you consider all the other times you've pretty much looked the other way. I mean, you pointed out yourself in your message to me when Lucky first got cut, was that they were willing to sign Greg Hardy in spite of all the rumors and all the facts that we did know about him, and especially the fact that he made no intent of hiding how horrible of a person he was in real life to begin with. And so you look the other way when he did that, but you were unwilling to do that on someone who, just had his dog stolen from him, and he only got back by paying off the ransom. This person did not have really any record prior to this, and you still let him go. After all the other times you make excuses for everyone else, especially Ezekiel Elliott, and even Julius Randle, Joseph Randle, back when he was back on the team. You made excuse after excuse after excuse for all these other players. What?
Josh Brent as well.
Josh Brent. Oh, Josh Brent's another good one. He killed a teammate. The guy killed a teammate by drunk driving. You still kept him on. It's utterly ridiculous that you decided out of all of these incidents, you put your foot down on Lucky Whitehead. And it's just stupid. It's absolutely horrendously stupid. I say good luck to Lucky Whitehead. I hope he's, even though he wasn't, and that's the thing about it too, is just that because Lucky Whitehead did not have the outstanding talent of someone like Ezekiel Elliott or Greg Hardy, they were willing to sacrifice him in order to at least pretend to be able to try to uphold some sort of standard of player conduct among their players. And so that's pretty much the end of the line that right there. It's just that's what they were decided to do with it, and it's completely and utterly bullshit. And like it's just like on top of a lot of other things too in the NFL that we'll get into it in a little bit. I mean, just only shows like how little owners care about the players. Okay, they only care about general. Like, I mean, it's not. It shouldn't come across as a surprise. But if we needed any more evidence, like this and the bigger news, I would say that came out this week, and the bigger actions that came out this week, only sort of serves to reinforce just how little owners seem to care about players and how players must really like watch out for themselves at this point.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It doesn't make any sense. The NFL has been called N-word for hire, and the owners of these teams, the commissioner who works for the owners, they need to get out of anything that deals with player discipline, and they just need to say they don't care about that unless they're a good player, because good players can get away with anything. And then if you are a marginal receiver that likely wasn't going to make the team anyways, you get cut for something even though you're not guilty at all. I mean, it's a double standard. It's absurd that you can try to justify your actions. I mean, Jason Garrett got some heat. He had to answer the questions from the media about it, and it's just absurd to me.
I mean, the bigger reason too that like Jason Garrett was getting heat was like this. His entire tenure, he's been preaching about how they only look for the right kind of guy, and it's just like every time they do that, it just blows up in their face, you know. So I mean, it's just like what. I mean, like this double standard is ridiculous, and then on top of that too, I mean, not only that, but I mean, like just to branch out for a little bit. I mean, you saw that like Colin Kaepernick has. I mean, while it's completely understandable to worry about like his effect on a locker room due to his political beliefs and his outstanding political beliefs, I mean, you look at all the people that still have jobs in the league and all these people that have been accused of domestic violence and the fact of the matter is that this guy still like led his team to a Super Bowl. Okay, and he wasn't that bad last year. Like he's someone that's probably more of a career backup at this point, but like he still can perform, and yet people are willing to sign people straight from the Arena Football League after who prior to that weren't even playing football to begin with. It's the fact that like owners are doing that is just, I mean, kind of goes back to what you were saying, like, you know, like how the NFL is becoming like N-words for lease. Okay, it's just like it's just so clear how owners are going out of their way to sort of just only reinforce this like this completely absurd morality that helps no one really. I mean, like the fact that you are willing to essentially blackball someone for like protesting, which by the way is protected by the First Amendment. It has been one of the founding principles of this country, that you're willing to completely disregard someone, but you're willing to, but if you're like, for example, the Ravens have to go and ask Ray Lewis, who has been accused of murdering people, and you have to ask him if Colin Kaepernick is a good person. That is the completely absurd situation we find ourselves in the NFL. Okay, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah,
I mean, you can say it's exactly. I mean, like it's understandable to an extent, but like if you're going to type of thinking, that type of logic, you better be consistent with it. And it's just like, I mean, it's just clear day in and day out that it's just not very consistent at all. You know, it's just like I mean, you go from sort of the circus that's being created right now by Ezekiel Elliott versus what was, I mean, like going back to the Lucky Whitehead situation. And I mean, it's just like the fact of the matter is that they're willing to put up with the circus if you are an incredible talent. And I mean, that's just the bottom line. And that's just, so I while I understand it, I don't really buy it, you know. And it's just, to me, like this wouldn't be an issue if people didn't make it one, specifically with Colin Kaepernick. Like if you disagree with someone's political views, that's fine. If you disagree with how someone goes about their political views, that's fine. But then stop paying attention to that person, because that's essentially what a protest is trying to do, is bring attention to an issue. And the fact that people want to make it into a circus, I think shouldn't necessarily be held against Colin Kaepernick. But that also being said, like I mean, this is it's harder to tell a group of people how to handle something versus telling like one single person. Unfortunately, or I mean, fortunately to some extent, it depends. Like it can go both ways. But I mean, to what we alluded to earlier in terms of just like how clearly like the NFL doesn't care about its players. So recently, the NIH released a study where they found pretty much, I believe it was 110 out of 111 cases of former NFL players that all had signs of CTE, which is essentially just like due to concussions, their brains were irreversibly damaged, and because of that, the NFL decided to end their partnership with NIH due to the results. And I mean, just again, it just shows the complete BS that is the NFL, that they would end a partnership with not even just end a partnership, but just so thoroughly just not care about player safety. Like, I mean, they've known about this for years, and they pretend to say like, oh, we care about getting to the bottom of this, and then when they reveal that the truth is something that is not good or is not something that is pleasing to the NFL decides to look away. And I mean, this is why the NFL, I think it just sort of like goes back to sort of the larger point that the NFL is losing a lot of its viewers and a lot of its audiences, because I think just down to the bone, just like people know that these people are essentially killing themselves for our entertainment. And I mean, it's becoming harder and harder for me, at least, to stay a football fan. And just this stuff right here is part of it. And I mean, if and it's for whatever reason, it kind of also reminds me of just like how like a bigger problem too is just like this is also indicative of the lack of strong leadership that we do have. I don't say in this country, but like, I mean, you look back on like how like Theodore Roosevelt essentially saved football as a sport by basically going out of his way to institute all these safety rules for the game. Because before that, like people were straight up dying due to playing football, and he actually went out of his way to protect the players. And the fact that we have leaders that are unwilling to really vouch for that is, I think, a true condemnation of where we are at in terms of leadership within the NFL. I think that the fact that like a former president back in the early 1900s was more willing to protect its players, was more willing to protect the players of the sport than the commissioner today, is a true combination of the reign of Goodell.
Yeah, I mean, if you watched the movie Concussion with Will Smith and you saw what the NFL tried to do with that research when it first came out, they tried to cover it up. I mean, this isn't surprising to me. My question for you is, 30 years down the line, do you think the NFL, A, exists as the same as it is now, B, it exists as something that's still football, but it's completely different, the game has changed, or C, it's gone? What do you think?
I think there's a possibility of it being gone, but I think the most likely situation is that like the game is changed significantly, because this game is not going to survive if they're going to be unable to attract the most talented athletes that they can. And like this is only going to, because you only have like a finite amount of elite level of players that you can go after in America. Okay, especially since this is only very specifically an American sport. And the fact of the matter is that like you look at all these other sports that are not only like not as dangerous, but also like are willing to pay their players a heck of a lot more. Like, I mean, like basketball, like you're already getting players that are getting $200 million contracts. Baseball has no cap, so you can get paid whatever, so long as you're incredibly talented. I mean, soccer, I mean, like I mean, granted, like in order to get the money, you'd have to go to Europe, but I mean, like it's
way safer.
Yeah, and way safer as well. And even hockey to some extent, like, I mean, like, yeah, it's a pretty dangerous sport in and of itself, and there's a cap in it, and you get paid a heck of a lot less for it. But I mean, at the same time too, like, at least you can, to some extent, as someone that does follow what happens in the AHL, you can say that the NHL cares about its players, to player safety to some extent. With NFL, I don't get that. I don't get that perspective. I don't get that. I don't sense that from the NFL, and that's what's so disturbing about it. And while I don't think it's going to be gone, I mean, with the rate things are going, if they don't get better leadership in there, and if they don't get a commissioner that is way to put player safety as his number one priority or her priority, I mean, it could, yeah, I mean, his or her priority should be a top priority should be player safety at this point, because they have to start convincing the athletes of America that just because they play football does not mean they're going to be given a death sentence, essentially. Because this is what CTE does. It significantly shortens your lifespan. Your career is not guaranteed to last long enough to get all the money back to pay for all the treatment that will be necessary for the effects of playing football.
Yeah, and I think we've already kind of seen we saw a lot of the 49ers players retire early. I think we're going to continue to see that. Players that just, I mean, they're still at the top of their games, but they just don't want to deal with the rehab or just the injuries and the concussion concerns. And then the parents now that have kids growing up that are, 1 or 2 or in early elementary school, when those kids become middle school age, are they going to let them play football? And I think it's a very crucial time for the NFL in how they respond to this news, and they can go a lot of different directions. And I think they have to convince this generation of parents that the game is still safe for their kids, because if they don't, soccer is one of the fastest growing sports in America. I think it's going to gobble up. Again, you mentioned that basketball. Basketball is really popular with kids nowadays as well. And then baseball is a global game, and baseball has its issues of its own in trying to get more youth into it and get the speed of the game fixed. But I think it's going to be another avenue for young athletes for the next generation to go to. So, yeah, I think this is a very crucial time for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, like, if there's one thing that it works for the favor of NFL, it's that you have so many players that are needed to make a team. Like, you need 50 players per team, and so like there's always there with the NFL can at least make that pitch that, like, hey, yeah, like, problems with it, but like there's a greater chance of of you as an athlete to be able to make this league versus with like the NBA, where you only get like 12 people 12 to 15 people, right, per roster. I mean, MLB, you only get 24 on the starter, and then you get maybe like 40 man after a certain point. Although you have, at least with those two leagues too, like those two leagues as well as the NHL, you have like a pretty significant minor league system. So even then, like, they're trying to take the steps to make sure that like the players not only get playing time, but like are also developing, and the NFL doesn't even do that. So
interesting times we live in, and we'll see what happens with that. Let's talk briefly about the Texans. The one biggest note from camp is Dwayne Brown not reporting. He continues to want that contract renegotiation, get more money. So we'll see what happens with that. I think biggest training camp headlines for the team is quarterback position. So see if Deshaun Watson versus Tom Savage. who wins the job opening day, and then how big is that leeway if Savage wins the job, and how far is Watson behind? How fast does he pick up the playbook? B is the offensive line. As I mentioned, Dwayne Brown is holding out, and the offensive line, as bad as Osweiler was, it wasn't good last year either in opening up running lanes or protecting the quarterback. And they have a lot of inexperience up front. So that's going to be a question mark. And then finally, the secondary. So they lost 2 starters from last year's team. So it's going to be up to Romeo Crennel to make sure that secondary continues to be great, because I think the front 7 is going to be loaded with Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, and Whitney Merciless. So it's going to see if that secondary can hold up as the number 1 defense they were last year.
Yeah, for the Cowboys, to switch back to the Cowboys, I mean, again, like really, I mean, the big news going into this is just, again, like how are suspensions going to affect this year? We already know that David Irving's going to be out. And this is the good David Irving, not the Holocaust denying one who's been stirring up trouble throughout the South this past week. I mean, all eyes are going to be on Dak Prescott. It looks like everyone's going to keep him in mind when they're game planning for the Cowboys this year. They're going to make sure that they're going to try to make sure they don't get burned by him, and it's going to be all up to Dak to make the right adaptations to his game in order to anticipate the game plans against him. And especially if he ends up not having Ezekiel Elliott for a few games this season, and then it's they still got a good shot. They got a good shot this year to try and repeat as NFC East champs. But I mean, it's going to be tough to tell. I will say that.
Yeah, we'll see what impact Taco Charlton has on that defensive line as well. But let's move on to shout-outs. First, Jordan Spieth. We mentioned the Open Championship leaderboard last week, and he was leading, and he ended up coming back and finishing -5 in his final 5 holes and winning the Open Championship, his 3rd career major. So well-deserved for Jordan Spieth. Shout-out to him.
Hook him to him, yeah.
Yes, hook him indeed. Hall of Fame induction was today in Cooperstown. Tim Raines, Jeff Bagwell, and Pudge Rodriguez all inducted, so well-deserved for all 3 of them. We mentioned them when they were announced to be in the Hall of Fame, but again, Jeff Bagwell, for me as a Astros fan, I caught the very tail end of his career, but I mean, loved the stance. Every kid in Houston growing up watching the Astros tried to mimic that exaggerated stance. But I was listening to his Hall of Fame speech, and he mentioned that he was proud most about his game was his base running. He took pride in, as a first baseman, in stealing 200 bases, which nowadays you don't really see that anymore with the sabermetrics and the art of not getting caught when you're on the base pass. But in addition to all the home runs and RBIs, he emphasized that he was a great base runner, and also just the love of the game that he had for all his teammates. He mentioned a lot of the equipment managers, the general managers, the guys you don't see on the field every day. So you have any thoughts on Pudge?
Well, I mean, speaking of people that were able to catch people stealing base, I mean, Pudge Rodriguez also gave his speech today as he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think arguably he's probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, defensive catchers of all time. I mean, he's just someone that, like, you could, like, if you tried running on him, like, you better be fast, because like you never could really catch a break with him. Like, he's someone that could scoop a ball that, like, went into the dirt and get up into his stance and just toss out a player trying to steal second. And like that's a lot of that has to do with just A, his arm strength, and B, also his ability to quickly just get into his stance. But I mean, on top of that too, he's one of the greatest hitting catchers of all time as well. Like, he was someone that could hit for average and hit for power. He was a clutch hitter as well. He was very much a reason why the Rangers were able to have any success during the 90s. And the big reason why the Marlins won the World Series in 2002. he's just an all-around amazing player. And so I'm just so happy to see the original Mr. Ranger go in to the Hall of Fame, and really is the first player to go in who's pretty much is going to go in as an identified Texas Ranger. Shout out to Chichi Gonzalez. Shout out to Chichi Gonzalez for basically trying to heal his arm without Tommy John surgery for half the season, and then getting Tommy John surgery just this past week. And so now he's going to miss 2 seasons, and not like it's not like he didn't completely waste last season too. So it's that's just the norm with Chi-Chi at this point. But also I think the biggest shout out should go to the U.S. men's national team for winning the Gold Cup. Shout out to Jordan Morris for the game-winning goal with 2 minutes left in regulation. Good job all around by the team, and just this should bode well for them as they try to lock up a qualification into the World Cup next year.
Also MLS, I guess, just to mention, the Dynamo got their first win on the road last week, 3-1. It helped playing the worst team in the league, but they beat DC United 3-1. And then last night they tied Portland 2-2, coming back with a late goal. They're still third in the West. We'll see how much Tomas Martinez integrates into the squad in the upcoming weeks. He was a DP that they signed a couple weeks ago. Should be the playmaker that they've needed. And they hopefully they get a bunch of their Gold Cup guys back scoring goals for them. I think the defense is still pretty solid. You could use upgrades there, but I think this team is good enough to return to playoffs, which they haven't been there the last 3 years, so that would be very good for them. FC Dallas, they're chugging along, second in the West. They beat Montreal last week 2-1. They lost.
Then they lost
to Vancouver 4-0 last night, which is a shocking loss, but.
It was shocking, but it was also just like I think this team was like kind of trying to get back in the swing of things with a few of their important players returning back. But yeah, Jesse Gonzalez just did not have a great game at all last night, and a few chances that Dallas had ended up getting called off. I think they lost a player to a red card, so it happens. You don't exactly expect teams to go perfect throughout the season. So they had already lost a few games to begin with. So it's not that big a deal, but it's just also like you obviously want your team to win, but I'm not too worried about FC Dallas at this point.
Yeah, and they're going to have 3 players in the All-Star game. The All-Star game is this Wednesday in Chicago at Soldier Field against Real Madrid. So that's always a spectacle. See if the MLS squad can pick up a win against the European champions who are in their preseason right now.
Yeah.
I want you guys to visit our website, tunatesonsports.com. Also like us on Facebook at tunatesonsports. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. You can also email us with any comments and suggestions at tunatesonsports@gmail.com. Nathan, I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you then, man. Have a great day.